we'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. And we'd like to take a moment to introduce everyone on the panel. Starting over towards the left, we have, towards the right, I'm sorry, we have Matt, that's Oliver, June, Sawyer, and I'm Even. And we'll be starting out the meeting with a introduction, and then we'll be following it with a tape, probably a 15-minute segment, which will then be followed by question and answers. And if everyone would be so kind as to hold their questions until the question and answer period, we'd appreciate it.
If you've read the material, then hopefully you'll be prepared for some of what we're going to say, because we have what we feel is a very large picture. It's not the kind of information that's easily digestible by the human brain. And each one of you has a different computer, in other words, a brain, to try to understand what we're trying to say. And so we find ourselves in an awkward, to some degree, position of trying to interface with each one of you in your own lingo. Some of you may come from a background of some religious background, or Christian, or some of you may be Buddhists, or some of you may think religions are all off track. But we know the information that we have can speak to all of you. But it's also going to require of you that you listen and try to restrain judgment of what we're saying. Because the more you can listen, the higher you can reach for what we're saying, and the higher we can reach to try to be decent instruments of the information that we have. We're not channelers, but we feel like we're trying very hard to be in tune with that level above human that is responsible for everything that's been created on this planet. So what is the level above human? That might be one of your first questions. How do you define it? We refer to it as the evolutionary kingdom level above human. A physical place. In other words, where individuals have physical containers or biological bodies, where there are many members. Not necessarily as many as there are in the human kingdom, as there are not as many humans as there are animals in the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. But we are talking about a real kingdom level. It's not the same thing as the astral world, the spiritual plane. We're talking about a place where people do things. They have function, they have activity, they have tasks. They make mistakes. They improve themselves. We use the word kingdom only because it better describes the fact that there is an individual that you could refer to as the king, who we would refer to more as the chief of chiefs, or the creator of creators. And it is his love for the human kingdom, the stepping stone kingdom that he created, to give the opportunity for new membership in his kingdom by giving opportunities for human individuals to make a transition out of the human kingdom. He doesn't have to do that. Those in that kingdom have no need for more members. It is simply their gift to provide options for individuals in the human kingdom to make choices that would find themselves making application into that kingdom.
Maybe another way to come at this large piece of information, and we probably will come at it from several different points of view because it is such a big picture, is if you think about space, and a lot of our minds have been on space in the last couple of weeks with what's happening with Jupiter, and people have wondered, is there an intelligence behind the universe? Or is this all just happenstance? Well, maybe think about it from this perspective, that before the human kingdom, which we're all a part of right now, was, another kingdom actually existed, which is what we're calling an evolutionary kingdom level above the human kingdom. That kingdom existed before the dinosaurs, before amoebas, before anything on this planet. And in a very real sense, this whole planet, or you could call it a garden, is an experiment of that kingdom level. We all here are an experiment of a higher kingdom level, a very real kingdom level. That kingdom level has, like Sawyer was saying, many members. And let's say, for simplistic illustration, that the higher minds in that kingdom decided to have this experiment, and so in a sense they told their design department to design a garden. In a sense, they had to put around it all the elements that we're very familiar with, the periodic table of elements, and all the building blocks of life. And they were all put here not by happenstance, but by design. Everything that, even the very creatures on the planet are made up of all those elements. They were all put here. The atmosphere around the planet that was designed. And there's this debate, if you read the papers of Christianity, has this debate between creation and evolution, and we don't see any debate there at all, because that kingdom level can put into motion certain subroutines, which you might call evolution. Meaning that certain sequences of the development on this planet of, let's say, containers for creatures to occupy, as the souls learn more lessons, you could trace, like anthropology can trace various chains or links between, let's say, amphibians, and then all of a sudden there's these missing links. And another creature is actually inserted into the chain, and the anthropologists wonder what happened there. There's this big gap, and that was certainly intentional. I mean, so they didn't intend for us to be able to figure out the whole picture. But if you consider that this is a garden for nurturing souls, and as the soul develops and gets more and more lessons under its belt, or becomes more and more advanced, it needs a more advanced container to occupy. And so more advanced containers were introduced into the planet. And so you have right now a planet with numerous, different stratas of life, and animal life, plant life, human life on it. And then periodically throughout the experiment, that kingdom level actually sends representatives down to upgrade the various levels of life on the planet. And there's a history book that records it, which we refer to as the Bible, that interaction between that level above human and the experiment that they were conducting. And you can see, various instances, and they happen somewhat cyclically, of members of that kingdom relating very closely with members of the human kingdom. If you look at the civilization as being roughly 6,000 years, and then you look back to the time of Moses, which was roughly 4,000 years ago, you can see a very close association at that time. The human kingdom at that time was very primitive, and they gave various basic sets of conduct to upgrade the humans. The Ten Commandments, you know, if you're going to, and other ones, you know, related to that, like if you're going to consume, you might as well wash your hands before that. If you're going to sleep around, sleep with one person, honor thy father and their mother, very basic things. Then 2,000 years later, they sent another representative, which we all know through the history books as the one that was referred to as Jesus. And again, an update was given to the individuals of this kingdom. And that update contained in it information of actually, if you take Jesus out of the religious context and think of, okay, he came from a level above the human kingdom. In a sense, he came from the future to this kingdom to give the individuals on this level what it takes to become members of that kingdom. So in order to do that, he couldn't interface with the people in the bodies that they occupy in that kingdom level because it doesn't work that well. Just like, you know, a long time ago in the Bible, the members of that kingdom could, you know, mingle with the people, but as the civilization progressed, there was too big a gap there. So what happens is that individual from that actual literal kingdom level above human leaves his body there, takes the mind or soul that's in that, that was occupying that body and incarnates, which means takes that chunk of mind and tries to integrate that into the circuitry of a human body, which is very difficult. It's like taking the mind of Einstein and trying to shove it into a dog and trying to communicate. So, you know, if you read the history books, it wasn't until approximately age 29 in the life of the one you call Jesus that that information actually comes in. And they represent it symbolically on the with the dove at the river of Jordan, where John the Baptist says, oh, goodness, something's happening here, and this person is not, you know, he's not like me. This is the one you need to look to. He is from another place. And he was from another place. And he brought the individuals at that time up a notch, and he thought at the beginning of his ministry that he would be able to give enough of the basic behavioral requirements of that kingdom for some of the ones who were closest to him, known as the disciples, to actually make an evolutionary transition. But towards the end of his ministry, he knew that he hadn't given them enough information, or they hadn't made enough changes to do that. So he said, listen, okay, that's nothing lost here. Where I go, you cannot come. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And don't worry, you'll be saved. You'll be born again. And we'll pick it up at a later time. Okay, so we're back to the experiment again, 2,000 years later. Just as was prophesied or promised, again, 2 individuals this time were sent from that kingdom. They left their bodies in that kingdom behind. They had physical bodies. They left them there. They took those minds or souls and tried to, again, incarnate into 2 humans that were, you know, pretty normal looking humans, but those bodies had been picked and prepped for this time period. So those minds from that kingdom level, from the future, came in and tried to integrate into the circuitry of bodies or vehicles from this kingdom level, which is an extremely difficult task to do. Again, it's like taking the circuitry of Einstein, shoving it into a dog and trying to explain what, you know, the physics lab is like to the dog kingdom. So it took them roughly 3.5 years to kind of assimilate and put those pieces together, let their brains be able to comprehend enough of the picture to give it out. In 1975, those 2 individuals gave meetings around the country. They called themselves Bo and Peep. Since then, they've taken the names T and Do. They are 2 individuals from that kingdom level. Their task at that time in 1975 was to gather a crew which had had previous association with them from 2,000 years ago, who had started their overcoming, trying to get out of the human kingdom, gather them up. And they did so in meetings. And some of us sitting here are those who have been with them this time to learn the basic behavioral requirements of the kingdom level above the human kingdom. And again, we're getting back to a very real kingdom level, that the human kingdom was never designed as the top of the evolutionary ladder. It was designed as a stepping stone But it's also part of the design to keep humans pretty much blinded to that fact when that opportunity isn't available. There are only certain intervals when that opportunity is available, and that's when representatives from that kingdom are here. So the ones of us who are giving these meetings now have spent time with those two individuals trying to learn the ways of that kingdom level. And we thought that was going to be the end of our task. But as of January this year, it was given to us to know that there are others out there who have also had previous association with that kingdom level, who might be at this point in time ready to end their lessons at the human kingdom and actually take residency or take beginnership in a literal kingdom level above human. And we know this is very, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's hard for people to even comprehend that there is a real kingdom level above human, because we've been so programmed all this time to think of Jesus and God sitting up there on, next to each other on a throne, and you're going to go up there and you're going to strum on harps and whatever. And when you start thinking, no, it's not like that at all. It's extremely real. There's tasks up there. And you don't get to heaven by dying. And that's a big concept for a lot of people to swallow. And that's what we're here to talk about, that you do not get to heaven by, adoring some savior and thinking that's it. And, waking up on some cloud somewhere. It doesn't happen that way.
Sometimes we have referred to the process of separating from the human kingdom and preparing to enter as a beginner in the next level as equivalent to an astronaut training program. In a sense, that individual came 2,000 years ago, whom we recognize as Jesus. He was preparing them to enter a kingdom level from which he had come that they really had very little knowledge of. And he recognized that, as June said, they would have to continue with their lessons at a later time. And we believe that this garden, this planet, is going through a season, if you will, where that door to that kingdom level is open again, where individuals can complete their overcoming process. Or, to use another analogy, complete the construction of their chrysalis and become new creatures. This cannot happen unless individuals are willing to sever all their ties to this world and establish new ties with that kingdom level. Just as a caterpillar must discontinue consuming leaves in order to become a butterfly, so must the human who wishes to complete this transition cease human activity and adopt the ways and behavior of the kingdom level above human. This can only occur while an individual, a representative from that kingdom, an older member, is present, incarnate in a human body to take individuals through that process. It's similar to a sponsor taking someone through the Alcoholics Anonymous program. You can't help someone overcome alcohol unless you have indulged in it yourself and you know what it's like to go through the withdrawal symptoms. The individual who was here 2,000 years ago lived a normal human life until he awakened to his true identity. But he knew what it took to take his disciples through some of the DTs of overcoming and separating from the human world. Our teacher, who is here now, has been through the human experience. He and his father, who also incarnated into a female vehicle, went through a normal human existence for a period of roughly 40 years, living like anybody else. Our teacher indulged in a wide range of activities, experiencing a wide range of addictions to human pursuits, if you will, raising a family, having a career. And now it's his job to show us how we can drop all that and become, like he has become, one who is no longer interested in the human world, but is interested only in serving his older member in the heavens. The kingdom level above human is not a static place. It is a place where growth continues indefinitely. The chief, the creator, is constantly evolving. And there are ones in that kingdom level who are constantly struggling to keep up with him and evolve with him. Of course, no one can grow as fast as he can, but his knowledge is passed down through them to father and son in that kingdom level, if you can think of that term in an androgynous sense, until it reaches the lower levels of that kingdom, when some are assigned the task of coming down here and relating to the human kingdom to show how that transition is accomplished. We are in the process of learning how to draw upon that mind, that source of nourishment from our older member, our representative, while he is here. Because if we can complete that, if we can learn how to adopt the thinking and ways of that kingdom to be compatible with the next level vehicle, then we can survive as newborns in that level. You have to understand that the vehicles or the bodies of that kingdom level are neither male nor female. They do not need to eat. They do not need to sleep. They do not need to reproduce. They have the capacity to communicate with each other telepathically. They have little use for words. If you can imagine yourself as a crew member aboard a ship in the heavens serving the chief, and you have no control over your thoughts, and those thoughts contain desires directed at others aboard the crew, or reactions to their behavior, such as jealousy or inappropriate anger or static of whatever sort may occur, then you would not be acceptable in that ship. You would not be able to function as a smooth member of that crew. It's similar to a human family that is trying to bring a dog into their household. That dog cannot continue to participate in dog activities and scratching the furniture or barking loudly at all hours of the night and day and expect to remain an accepted member of that household. He must adopt certain human ways in order to become welcomed there, and in order to join in the human activities. And of course, you've seen dogs that have accomplished that and really think of themselves as a member of that human family. And that human family regards that dog as part of their crew. Well, we know that we desire nothing more than becoming welcome in the household of that kingdom level. And we are striving every day to become more like the representative who is here, who is taking us through this overcoming process. We know that time is short for those who may hear this information and choose to act on it as we have acted on it. We don't believe it will require 18 years of you, those of you who choose to do this. But we do believe that shortly, within this generation, some will exit the human kingdom, will be picked up in what you would refer to as a UFO, a bus of that kingdom level, and be taken into the heavens. The headquarters of that heavens is a real physical place. It has a location within the universe, which we do not know, but we know that these individuals of that kingdom level have the freedom to travel anywhere they wish in the heavens. They are not limited to any particular world or planet.
Quick clarification. I don't know if we made this clear. When we were describing the events of 2,000 years ago, we were saying that the mind from the kingdom of heaven, from the evolutionary level above human, that came into Jesus, that all of a sudden made him a teacher that the whole world paid attention to, really came in at age 29 or 30. And if you study the history of Jesus, you have a big gap. And some people say, well, he went to Egypt, prior to that, or he went to Greece, India, and the stories go on about all these things. Or at the very least, he was an Essene, and he was really an Essene leader, and he just passed that information on. We're saying that any of those could be true. But what we're saying is the history of that vehicle, that human container, prior to the entrance of the mind from the kingdom of heaven, was rather irrelevant, because people said when he showed up and started to actually teach during the 3.5-year teaching period, they said, well, he's just the carpenter's son. I knew him. He grew up down the street. In other words, he's nobody special. How can he be the Christ, the Messiah that everybody's waiting for? So we had the same circumstance here. And what we're trying to say is these minds came in to two human bodies that were already in their 40s. The bodies themselves had had lives prior to that and had gotten into all kinds of things. The minds themselves were for the kingdom of heaven. They had not been into those things. So during the 3.5-year awakening process, you check me if I'm saying this correctly, but during that 3.5 years, in other words, they changed the thinking and the behavior of those bodies to be a match for bodies and thinking that are in the kingdom of heaven. In other words, so that what they're doing is they're going through in a very short period of time the so-called overcoming process. When Jesus said, I've overcome the world, he means I've moved my thinking and behavior from this kingdom level to that kingdom level, and I'm ready to leave. Now I'll teach you, you do the same, and you can leave with me. So in other words, it's not like they got into those things. They simply took over a body that was already into them being pure, and they then changed them over so that the bodies matched their own, thinking. So then we've been in seclusion for 18 years trying to do the same thing. In other words, by the time the class started, the public meetings in 1975, 1976, where we were sitting in the audience, we heard the information and decided, well, it just felt very true to us. And we said,